The world is full of mysteries, some are waiting to be discovered, and others are meant to remain hidden. But what if someone found something they were never supposed to see? This is the story of Dr. Daniel Cross, a rogue scientist who disappeared under impossible circumstances. He wasn't lost, he didn't run away, he stepped into something no one could explain. One moment, he was standing in front of his recording equipment, the next, gone. It started with a signal, a transmission unlike any other. It pulsed in a rhythm too precise to be random, too structured to be natural. At first, experts dismissed it, until Daniel noticed something, a hidden pattern, a sequence that wasn't just a message. It was an invitation. An invitation to where? No one knew. But Daniel was obsessed. He traced the signal to a remote mountain range, untouched by civilization. He believed this was the point of origin. He was right. Ignoring warnings from the authorities, he set out alone, carrying only a few days' supplies and his recording equipment. The deeper he ventured into the mountains, the stronger the signal became. It was leading him somewhere, guiding him. Then, at the precise coordinates revealed by the signal, he found something unexplainable. A distortion in the air. A shimmering anomaly, warping the space around it. It wasn't a solid structure, but something more, like a window into somewhere else. Daniel, being the scientist he was, had to know more. He set up his camera, speaking to it in hushed excitement. If I'm right, this isn't just a message. It's a doorway. Then, he did something no one expected. He reached out. The moment his fingers touched the distortion, reality twisted. His entire body was enveloped in a blinding light. For a fraction of a second, his expression changed, from curiosity to realization. Then, he vanished. The next morning, his equipment was found exactly where he left it. But Daniel was gone. No footprints. No sign of struggle. Just, gone. For days, no one knew what had happened. Then, a new signal appeared. This time, it wasn't just a pattern. It was Daniel's voice. But it wasn't right. His words were warped, his tone distorted. And worse, he wasn't speaking in any known language. Authorities moved quickly, confiscating all evidence. But one piece of footage leaked, a final recording from Daniel's camera. It showed something terrifying, a colossal, glowing entity standing before him, shifting in form. Daniel looked back at the camera, and then, he was gone. Where did he go? Was he taken? Or did he willingly step into the unknown? And then, a final message was received. I was wrong. It's not what we thought. Do not follow. And then, silence. To this day, Dr. Daniel Cross remains missing. No trace of him has ever been found. No official records acknowledge the case. But those who have seen the footage know the truth. Something found him. And he's never coming back. It began as a whisper in the void. A faint, rhythmic pulse that appeared out of nowhere, so subtle, so easily dismissed, that most radio astronomers didn't even notice it. But Dr. Daniel Cross did. Sitting alone in his dimly lit research lab, buried under stacks of papers and old transmission logs, Daniel spotted something impossible. A repeating pattern, unlike any natural cosmic signal. It wasn't the usual background noise of the universe, nor was it a pulsar or a simple radio echo. No, this was different. At first, he thought it was interference, maybe a satellite or some rogue transmission bouncing through the atmosphere. But after running it through his decryption software, something sent a chill down his spine. There was structure. A pattern. A message. The signal pulsed at precise intervals, each burst containing a strange sequence of numbers. Not just random noise, but an ordered set of prime numbers, a universal constant in mathematics. This wasn't an accident. Someone, or something, was sending it on purpose. Daniel cross-referenced it with all known sources, military satellites, deep space probes, even old Cold War frequency records. Nothing matched. The signal wasn't from any known human technology. In fact, it didn't even seem to be coming from deep space at all. It was coming from Earth. More specifically, a remote mountain range in a classified zone, untouched by modern infrastructure. A place where no known transmissions should be originating. That alone was enough to send Daniel's heart racing. Was it a hoax? A secret government experiment? He tried contacting his colleagues, but none of them had detected anything unusual. If this was a naturally occurring phenomenon, why was he the only one seeing it? He adjusted his instruments, filtering out unnecessary background noise. That's when it happened. The signal changed. It responded to him. The pattern shifted, rearranging itself in real time. Like it knew it was being watched. Daniel's fingers hovered over his keyboard. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to call someone, anyone. But deep down, he knew, he was already too far in. Ignoring his own instincts, he traced the signal's coordinates. It pointed to a location deep in the mountains, in a restricted area where no known facilities existed. That's when he made his decision. He packed his gear, grabbed his camera, and prepared for a journey into the unknown. This was no ordinary signal. It wasn't just a message. Dr. Daniel Cross had spent his life searching for proof that humanity wasn't alone. Now, the answer had practically fallen into his lap. The signal, structured, deliberate, and undeniably artificial, was coming from a remote mountain range, deep inside what was officially labeled a restricted zone. But why? Daniel knew he couldn't just ignore it. If this signal was real, it meant something, or someone, was trying to make contact. But the fact that the source was coming from Earth, and not from the stars, made it even more unsettling. Who or what could be sending this? Equipped with his laptop, portable signal tracker, and a camera, Daniel set off toward the site. He had to travel light. If this was a hoax or a military operation, the last thing he needed was to look like an intruder. The mountain range in question was almost completely off-limits, guarded by outdated government warnings about unstable terrain and environmental hazards. But Daniel knew better. Something was being hidden here. As he drove through the last town before the restricted zone, the locals were different. Quiet. Watchful. He stopped at a roadside diner for supplies and noticed the way the waitress avoided eye contact when he asked about the mountains. The old man sitting at the counter shifted uncomfortably when he mentioned strange radio signals. "You don't want to go up there," the man muttered, stirring his coffee. "Why not?" Daniel pressed. The man hesitated, his wrinkled hands tightening around the mug. "People who do, don't come back the same." Daniel tried to laugh it off. "You mean they don't come back at all?" But the man didn't smile. That's when he noticed the bulletin board behind the counter. Tattered missing person flyers covered it, some dating back decades. Hikers. Campers. Scientists. All vanished near the same mountain range. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. Was this just paranoia? Urban legends? Or was there something more to it? Despite the warnings, he pressed on, leaving the last signs of civilization behind. The deeper he drove into the wilderness, the less connected he felt. His GPS malfunctioned. His phone lost all reception. Even his signal tracker started giving off erratic readings, as if whatever was out here was actively distorting radio waves. Then, the road ended. He was miles away from any known trail, staring at the base of a towering, mist-covered mountain. The signal was coming from somewhere up there. With no other choice, he grabbed his gear, secured his backpack, and started the climb. As he ascended, an eerie stillness settled over the mountain. No birds. No wind. No sounds. Just an unnatural silence pressing down on him, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel saw something. Carved into the mountain's rock face, barely visible beneath decades of overgrowth, was a man-made entrance. An impossibly large doorway. And it was open. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the massive doorway embedded into the mountainside. It wasn't natural. It wasn't weathered by time. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, had built it. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the settings on his camera, taking careful shots of the entrance. The sheer scale of the opening was staggering, at least 20 feet high, its edges lined with an intricate pattern of symbols carved deep into the stone. They weren't any known language, at least not one Daniel had ever seen before. His mind raced. If this was an old military bunker, why were there no warnings? No signs? Why had this place been erased from modern records? A low hum vibrated through the air, almost imperceptible, but just enough to make his bones feel like they were buzzing. His signal tracker flickered wildly in his hand, picking up bursts of energy from deep within the structure. Someone, or something, was still here. Taking a cautious step forward, Daniel turned on his flashlight and peered inside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing an impossibly long corridor. Unlike the rough stone outside, the interior was smooth, metallic, advanced. This wasn't just a cave. It was a facility. His heart pounded. What was this place? Swallowing his fear, he took a deep breath and stepped inside. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, a low vibration shuddered through the walls, like something had been activated. Daniel spun around, ready to run, but the entrance remained open. He wasn't trapped. Not yet. His flashlight flickered as he moved deeper into the corridor. The air was thick, almost too perfect, as if it had been purified and recycled for centuries. The walls, though cold to the touch, showed no signs of decay. Then he saw them, the lights. Dim, pulsing lights embedded along the walls, stretching further into the darkness. They weren't old. They weren't broken. They were active. Something, or someone, had kept this place running. Daniel pressed forward, cautiously running his fingers along the strange material of the walls. It was metallic, but softer than steel. Warm, almost alive. His mind reeled. If this was an abandoned site, how was it still powered? That's when he saw the shadows. Not just his own, cast by the flickering light. No. Something moved in the distance. A silhouette. Tall. Motionless. Watching. His breath hitched. He wasn't alone. Daniel fumbled for his camera, heart hammering against his ribs. He lifted it, zooming in, but the figure was gone. He exhaled sharply. His mind was playing tricks on him. Had to be. But then, a low whisper echoed down the corridor. Not in English. Not in any language he had ever heard. It was deep, resonant, like a voice coming from beneath the earth itself. And then, footsteps. Steady. Purposeful. Coming toward him. Daniel's breath came in short gasps. He had a choice. Run now, or find out what was waiting for him in the dark. Daniel's fingers tightened around his flashlight as the footsteps echoed down the metallic corridor. His instinct screamed at him to turn and run, but his curiosity kept him rooted to the spot. His heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. Who, or what, was coming? A gust of air swept past him, unnaturally warm, as if something had just exhaled from the depths of the corridor. The dim, pulsing lights along the walls flickered, casting twisting shadows that danced along the smooth metallic surface. Then, for a brief second, he saw them. Not just one. Multiple figures. Tall. Elongated. Watching. Daniel sucked in a sharp breath. He lifted his camera, his fingers trembling as he zoomed in, but the figures moved with unnatural speed. They disappeared into the darkness, shifting like phantoms, their presence more felt than seen. His instincts screamed that these weren't hallucinations. They weren't tricks of the light. They were real. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stepped forward, deeper into the corridor. The pulsing lights along the walls seemed to respond to him, growing brighter with each step, illuminating the path ahead. Then, he heard it. A voice. No, voices. Whispering in a language he didn't understand. The tones were deep, resonant, vibrating in the air around him. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out his audio recorder. His hands shook as he pressed the record button. The whispers continued, filling the device with their haunting, otherworldly cadence. And then, everything stopped. The lights. The whispers. Even the hum in the air. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Daniel's breath came in short, panicked bursts. The corridor ahead was still lit, but now it felt different. Anticipatory. Then, without warning, a shadow loomed over him. Daniel spun around, and there it was. A towering figure. 9 feet tall, its form barely distinguishable from the darkness. Its face, if it had one, was hidden beneath a hood-like structure. Its body was smooth, almost organic, as if it wasn't wearing clothes at all. Daniel's mouth went dry. His mind screamed at him to move, to run, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. The figure lifted an arm, slowly, deliberately. Daniel flinched, but it didn't attack. Instead, it extended its hand. A gesture. An invitation. Daniel swallowed hard. He knew what this moment was. This was first contact. And he was the only one here to witness it. His fingers trembled as he raised his own hand, mirroring the motion. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The pulsing lights around them flickered, as if reacting to their exchange. Then, the figure spoke. A single, deep, resonant word. Daniel didn't understand it. But somehow, he knew exactly what it meant. Welcome. Daniel's hand hovered inches away from the towering figure's outstretched palm. His breath was shallow, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to pull back, to run, but something deeper, something primal, told him that this was a moment of great importance. With a slow, deliberate motion, he completed the gesture, pressing his fingers against the figure's palm. The instant their skin met, a shockwave of sensation tore through him. His mind exploded with visions, memories, emotions that weren't his own. He wasn't just seeing them, he was experiencing them. He was standing on a barren world, its sky a swirling mix of deep purples and electric blues. Gigantic spires of an unknown metal jutted toward the heavens, pulsating with energy. The air smelled of ozone and something unfamiliar, something alien. Then the vision shifted. Now he was floating above Earth, watching as millennia unfolded before him. He saw ancient civilizations rise and fall, watched as early humans looked up to the skies, carving images of strange beings onto cave walls. He saw great wars, incredible discoveries, and the moment when humankind first dared to reach beyond their world. They had always been watching. The realization sent chills down Daniel's spine. Whoever these beings were, this 9-foot stranger, before him, they had been observing Earth for centuries, maybe longer. But why? The vision shifted again. Now he saw something far darker. A planet, burning. A civilization, dying. The sky was black with smoke, and monstrous machines tore through once thriving cities. Screams echoed, then were swallowed by silence. The world crumbled, then vanished into the abyss. Daniel staggered backward, gasping for air. The connection broke, and suddenly, he was back in the metallic corridor, staring up at the figure. His knees nearly buckled. What had he just seen? The figure regarded him in silence, its face still unreadable. Then, it did something unexpected. It spoke. Not in the strange, melodic language from before. This time, it spoke in a voice that rumbled through Daniel's bones, a perfect, hauntingly clear English. "You must understand." Daniel swallowed hard, still reeling from the visions. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Understand, what?" The figure tilted its head. For the first time, Daniel sensed something behind its impossible stillness, a deep sorrow. "Your world is next." The word struck like a thunderclap. Daniel's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" His voice cracked. "What's coming?" The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it turned, gesturing toward the far end of the corridor. The metal walls shimmered, and then they weren't walls at all. They became a window. Daniel took an uneasy step forward. Outside the ship, deep in the abyss of space, something moved. Something enormous. Something waiting. The alien figure looked back at him, its gaze unblinking. "You are not alone." Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he stared through the shimmering window into the void of space. Something huge loomed in the darkness, a structure? A ship? No, something alive. The being beside him remained still, its towering frame barely moving. Its words echoed in Daniel's mind. "You are not alone." A deep, primal fear gripped him. He could feel it, the same gut-wrenching instinct that had saved early humans from predators lurking in the night. But this wasn't a saber-toothed tiger or a lurking shadow in the forest. This was something much, much worse. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He forced himself to keep breathing, to push through the overwhelming dread. "What? What is that?" His voice was barely above a whisper. The being turned its glowing gaze to him. "A presence your kind has never encountered." Daniel swallowed hard. "But you have." A pause. "Yes." The window shimmered again, and suddenly, the past unfolded before him. A fleet of towering vessels, much like the one he stood in now, moved through space. Their sleek designs were unlike anything humans had ever created, pulsing with energy, crafted for more than just war. These were the ships of a people who had once thrived, who had once built wonders. Then, the shadows came. A darkness spread across the cosmos, swallowing entire worlds. It didn't attack with brute force. It didn't fire weapons. Instead, it infected. It corrupted. It waited. The vision shifted. Daniel saw a planet, once vibrant, now nothing but a husk. Its people were gone, erased. Not a single trace of them remained. No ruins, no bodies, just emptiness. It was as if they had never existed. Daniel staggered back, blinking rapidly as the vision faded. His heart pounded against his ribs. "They consume civilizations," the being said, voice low and solemn. "Not through war. Not through conquest. But through erasure." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "And they're coming for us?" Another pause. "They are already here." A chill ran down his spine. "What do you mean?" The being's gaze darkened. "Your world has already been marked." Daniel's mind raced. Was this why UFO sightings had increased? Why governments had always seemed so afraid to acknowledge extraterrestrial existence? Had they known all along? His pulse quickened. What if humanity was already infected? What can we do? His voice was unsteady, but he forced himself to ask. The being finally turned, moving toward a control panel. The symbols on the screen shifted rapidly. The cycle can still be broken, it said. But only if you act now. Daniel clenched his jaw. He had come here seeking answers, expecting wonder. But what he had found was something far greater, a war that had already begun, a battle humanity didn't even know it was fighting. And he was the only one who knew the truth. Daniel's mind reeled from what he had just learned. The words of the towering being echoed in his thoughts. Your world has already been marked. A cold sweat broke out on his skin as he struggled to process the weight of that statement. Earth wasn't just on some cosmic radar, it had already been chosen. But by what? And more importantly, how much time did they have left? He turned to the alien, his voice steadier than he felt. What do you mean? How can Earth already be marked? The being regarded him for a long moment before responding. They do not arrive with ships. They do not announce themselves. They slip through the cracks of your reality, unseen, unnoticed. Daniel's stomach twisted. Are they here now? The being gave a solemn nod. Their influence has already begun. A deep, gnawing fear took root in Daniel's chest. If this was true, then these invaders, these entities, had been among them for years, maybe even centuries. He thought of history's inexplicable disappearances, sudden technological advancements, erratic global events. What if humanity had been manipulated all along? His mind raced. How do we stop them? The alien hesitated, as if choosing its next words carefully. They do not operate as you do. They do not invade, they corrupt. They sow discord, dismantling civilizations from the inside. By the time their presence is undeniable, it is already too late. A chilling realization struck Daniel. Wars, political unrest, the collapse of empires, were these merely human failings, or had there been something else pushing civilization toward destruction? You said they erase civilizations, Daniel said, swallowing the lump in his throat. But how? What exactly do they do? The being's luminous eyes darkened. They remove identity. Daniel frowned. Identity? They do not destroy buildings or artifacts. They do not burn libraries. They make it so the people who lived, who built, who dreamed, were never there at all. A deep shiver ran down Daniel's spine. This wasn't just extermination. This was absolute erasure. He suddenly felt small, insignificant, in the grand scheme of the universe. If this was how they operated, then who else had already been erased? How many thriving civilizations had once existed, only to be wiped from history, their memory vanishing into nothingness? His voice was barely above a whisper. How do I fight something I can't even see? The alien regarded him with an unreadable expression. The corruption has already begun, but it can still be undone. It gestured toward a glowing interface at the far end of the chamber. There is something you must see. Daniel's pulse quickened as he stepped forward. His heart pounded as the interface flickered to life. And then, he saw it. The proof. The undeniable evidence that Earth's fate had already been decided. Unless he stopped it. But could he? Or was he already too late? Daniel's breath hitched as the glowing interface projected a series of images before him. At first, they seemed like mere distortions, blurry, shifting shapes, incomprehensible patterns. But as his eyes adjusted, the truth struck him like a hammer to the chest. It was Earth. Or rather, versions of Earth. Different timelines, different civilizations, all connected by one horrifying similarity: they no longer existed. Cities that should have been bustling with life were eerily abandoned. Entire nations were wiped clean from history, as if they'd never been there. Civilizations Daniel had never heard of, ones that should have thrived, had been reduced to nothingness, not by war, not by natural disaster, but by something else. His knees weakened. How is this possible? The alien beside him remained silent, letting the images speak for themselves. The projections shifted, showing ghostly remnants of cultures, their records altered, their existence systematically erased from universal memory. Daniel's mind reeled. He saw great empires whose histories had been rewritten, their influence erased. There was no rubble, no remains, just blank spaces where entire legacies had once stood. He turned to the alien, his voice barely a whisper. "You said they don't invade. They corrupt. Is this what you mean?" The being gave a solemn nod. "Your kind believes in history as something unchangeable, written in stone. But that is an illusion. The past can be rewritten. Memories can be erased. And when a civilization is no longer remembered, it ceases to be." A sickening dread settled in Daniel's stomach. If these entities had already begun working on Earth, how much of their own history had already been altered? "How do we even know what's real anymore?" he asked, his voice unsteady. "What if we're just remnants of something bigger that's already been erased?" The alien's response was chilling. "Would you know the difference?" Daniel felt as if the ground beneath him was crumbling. If what the alien said was true, then humanity's history might already be compromised. There could have been entire civilizations, entire eras, that had simply been wiped from existence without anyone realizing. He thought of the missing gaps in history, the unexplained technological jumps, the countless mysteries scholars had never been able to solve. What if the answers had never been lost, but erased? His hands clenched into fists. Then why tell me this now? If they're so powerful, why haven't they erased me yet? The alien's gaze hardened. Because you still have time. The corruption is not yet complete. The words sent a jolt of adrenaline through Daniel's veins. There was still time. But how much? His mind raced with possibilities. If he was going to fight back, he needed to understand more. He needed to find out who, or what, was behind this. And most importantly, he needed to warn humanity before it was too late. Daniel's heart pounded as he absorbed the alien's words. The past could be rewritten. Entire civilizations erased. And if this force, this unseen enemy, had already begun working on Earth, how much of their history had already vanished? He struggled to breathe, his mind racing through the implications. If history could be rewritten, then who controlled the present? Was humanity living in a reality that had been carefully altered, piece by piece, over centuries? Had entire wars, cultures, and breakthroughs been erased without anyone realizing? And if they had, who was next? Daniel grabbed the edge of the holographic console. "We have to stop this." His voice was firm, but his hands trembled. The alien's expression didn't change, but its glowing eyes darkened. "You do not understand what you are up against. Then explain it to me." The projections shifted. A swirling mass of light and darkness formed in front of him, like a storm frozen in time. The being pointed at it. "This is not a species. It is not an empire. It is not something you can simply fight. It is an intelligence, one that exists outside of time. It doesn't invade planets. It doesn't wage war. It simply removes." Daniel's pulse spiked. "Removes?" The alien nodded. "It manipulates history. It erases knowledge, cultures, people. It does not conquer. It ensures that a civilization's greatest minds, their strongest leaders, never existed in the first place. It is a slow and methodical process, spanning centuries. And when the corruption is complete, the species vanishes without a trace, as if it never was." Daniel felt a pit form in his stomach. If this was true, then humanity might already be on the edge of disappearing. How many figures in history had been altered? How many events had played out differently than they should have? He turned back to the alien. "Then why haven't they erased me yet? If I know the truth, wouldn't it be easier to wipe me out?" The alien hesitated. Because knowledge alone is not enough. You must act. You must spread the truth. Daniel's mind reeled. If he could warn humanity, maybe they could fight back. But how do you fight something that operates beyond time itself? His fingers curled into a fist. There has to be a way. The alien studied him for a moment before extending its hand. There is. But it will not be easy. A strange metallic device materialized before Daniel, small, sleek, pulsing with energy. This will allow you to see the alterations, the alien said. To perceive the changes before they become permanent. Daniel hesitated before reaching for it. As his fingers closed around the device, a shiver ran through him. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. If he failed, humanity wouldn't just fall. It would be erased. Daniel clutched the strange device in his hands, feeling its weight, both physically and metaphorically. This was it. The key to seeing the truth, to understanding the forces that had been silently rewriting history. But knowing wasn't enough. He had to act. The alien watched him with an eerie stillness. You now hold the only tool capable of revealing the alterations before they become permanent. But be warned, once you see the truth, you will never be able to unsee it. Daniel swallowed hard. How does it work? The alien gestured toward the device. Activate it, and you will perceive the shifts in time. You will witness the moments where history was rewritten. But more than that, you will become a target. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. He had barely survived this encounter. If the force manipulating history knew he was aware, what would it do to stop him? The alien's glowing eyes darkened. You must make a choice. If you use it, you will see the real timeline, but the enemy will know you are watching. If you refuse, you will live in blissful ignorance, until the day your world simply ceases to exist. Daniel's fingers tightened around the device. He thought of everything he had learned. The vanished civilizations. The possibility that history itself had been molded into something unnatural. And then he thought about Earth. His home. His people. Could he truly walk away from this? Pretend he had never learned the truth? The answer came before he even realized it. With a deep breath, he pressed the center of the device. A shockwave rippled through his body. His vision blurred, colors distorting, stretching. Then, clarity. The world snapped into focus. And he saw it. The alterations. It was like looking through shattered glass. Shadows of people that had once existed but were now erased flickered in and out of sight. Landmarks that should have been there dissolved into nothingness. Cities shifted, their histories rewritten in real time. He staggered back. His mind screamed, trying to process the impossible. The alien's voice cut through the chaos. Do you understand now? They are already deep within your world's timeline. You do not have much time. Daniel gritted his teeth. How do I stop it? The alien hesitated. You must gather others. Those who can also perceive the changes. Only together can you fight back. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. The enormity of the task loomed over him. He wasn't just fighting an enemy, he was fighting the very fabric of history itself. But he had made his choice. With one final look at the alien, he turned toward the unknown. Earth's survival depended on what he did next. As the dust settles and the echoes of this historic encounter fade into the unknown, one undeniable truth remains: humanity has changed forever. The moment we reached beyond our world, beyond our understanding, and made contact with something, or someone, greater than ourselves, we stepped into a new era of existence. But what happens next? Does humanity embrace this knowledge, forging a future where we are no longer alone? Or do we let fear dictate our actions, risking everything we have discovered? The answers remain out there, waiting among the stars. One meeting was just the beginning, what comes next is up to us. Milky Way, what do you think? Were they here as friends, or did we make first contact with something far beyond our comprehension? Let's discuss in the comments. Rock it if you love exploring the unknown, uncovering hidden truths, and questioning what lies beyond. Subscribe to Galactic Humanity for more mind-expanding content. Bell turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change how you see the universe. Fire like, share, and comment if you believe humanity is ready for the next step. The truth is out there. Are you ready to find it? Shooting star. #Galactic Humanity.